Welcome everyone to Deafblind Information Australia's final webinar, Interoception, the Eighth Sense. I would like to acknowledge the lands on which we're all meeting. Both myself and our presenter for today are on Whadjuk Noongar land. We pay respects to elders past and present. And we are still in the season of Camberang, and that's associated. We'll be experiencing hot weather, hot winds, dry heat, flowers, busy animal life, and such a sensory experience. So I think that description and everything that we experience in all the seasons ties really nicely with how someone might experience the seasons and have awareness of that. I welcome our guest presenter for this webinar, Melissa Evans, and thank her for agreeing to present this topic for us, which she did at the at Deafblind International's World Conference in July this year. Melissa is a practicing physiotherapist and deafblind consultant based in Western Australia. She's been working with people with deaf blindness for over 15 years and and with the diversity of this population as well. She's worked with children, adults, and followed them through significant moments and achievements in their lives, and works closely with their families as well. She presently runs her own business, Communication SW, and she's also the treasurer of Deafblind Western Australians. She's passionate about working together with individuals and feels that understanding sensory processing supports interactions and positive outcomes. And with that, I'll hand over to Melissa for the webinar.
Thank you, Melanie, and hello, and thank you everyone who are attending the workshop today titled Interoception, the Eighth Sense. Just as an audio description, I'm a woman in her 50s with silvering hair, and I'm wearing a black short sleeve shirt. The virtual background behind me is dark blue with the logos of Deafblind Information Australia, Able Australia, Senses WA, and Deafblind Australia. When I heard interoception mentioned at a Charge pre-conference in Perth in 2022 and realised it was well recognised as significant within other disability communities, I felt strongly that our deaf-blind community, both locally and internationally, need to consider it. So our presentation topics today are looking at our senses, the history of interoception. We'll explain interoception a little bit better, looking at the insular and limbic systems, clinical significance, intervention, final thoughts and questions. There are parts of the presentation that may seem quite heavy on medical information. However, it is important to present the whole picture, and I'd love to take the opportunity to explain anything further during question time or privately via my email provided at the end of the presentation. To participate fully in the deafblind-led experience of clinical intervention, we must learn to understand and believe the individual as they feel, see and live it, and not how we interpret it. Interoception is just another piece in the puzzle when supporting an individual to understand their sensory inputs and regulation. The research has given internal sensation a name. However, at home, clinically and educationally, you may already be witnessing this process and acknowledging it in your settings. If we look at where interoception sits within our sensory system, On the screen is a dark blue background slide with a large green rectangle in the middle. There are 5 small blue oval shapes surrounding it on the right, 2 medium yellow ovals on the bottom left, and 1 large grey oval on the top left. There is alt text for each shape representing the 8 senses. On the right, we have our 5 basic external sensory systems: visual, auditory, olfactory, which is our smell, gustatory, which is taste, and tactile. Then we have our 3 hidden internal sensory systems on the left. At the base, we have the widely recognised vestibular, which is head movement in space and balance, and proprioception, which is information about our muscles and joints of the body. And at the top, interoception. Now look a little bit about the history of interoception, because this is not new. This is a topic that's been understood for a long while. So initially, we have someone called Johann Christian Riehl, who discovered the existence of the insular cortex back in 1809. So sometimes if you're looking a little bit deeper into interoception, you will see the labelling of the insula as the island of Riehl. Initial acknowledgement of the actual term interoception was in the 1990s by Dr. Charles Sherrington, and it referred to the feelings we get from our internal organs. In the 1990s, as there was progression into a lot more deeper radiological and neurological examinations, Antonio Damasio then discovered that the insula plays an important role in processing these bodily sensations. It wasn't until 2002 that we have someone called A.D. Bud Craig, and he extended this interoception sense to include the entire condition of the internal body state. Within the field of autism clinical practice, this sense is really well recognised, and there's many great clinical authors that have produced resources and intervention strategies, especially Kelly Mailer and Kara Kozinski. Kelly Mailer, particularly as an OT, has some wonderful resources on her website, which is kelly-mailer.com, and through her Facebook page. So what is interoception? We'll look at some definitions first. So the first definition is from an article titled Functions of Interoception, published in 2021. And interoception is defined as a process of how a nervous system senses, interprets, and integrates signals originating from within the body. The second one is from an article titled Interoceptive Awareness Skills for Emotion Regulation, and was published in 2018. But this takes this quote from previous writings back to 1996. So we look at interoception a bit more detail, where we look at it as a perception of senses inside the body and includes a perception of physical sensations related to the internal organ functions, such as heartbeat, respiration, satiety, which is the feeling of fullness, as well as our autonomic nervous system related particularly to emotions. Interoception is about reading body skills. Can the individual read signals from their body telling them how it is going and what it needs? Interoception relates strongly to emotional regulation. We can feel our emotions in our body. Emotions that are physically stored in our body produce energy and movement. For example, the phrase like having butterflies in your stomach is describing a physical sensation, butterflies. We then name that emotional state. I am nervous, or I'm excited, I'm anxious. So what are the sensory components that are included in interoception? The image on the screen is a diagram of a human body with a brain and organs outlined internally. There are multiple text points pointing to body sections indicating the interoceptive sites, which we'll run through briefly. So moving clockwise from 1 o'clock around to 11 o'clock of the body, we have the interoceptive senses of anger, embarrassment, happiness, excitement, fear, thirst, heart rate, breathing rate, physical exertion, nausea, sexual arousal, pain, muscle tension, itch, need for the bathroom, social touch, hunger, fullness, tickle. And finally, we look at interoception via the insula, which is a part of the centre of the brain. Sure. Just going to go back. I think we've skipped one. No. Skipped a page. That's okay. I'm just going to just talk a little bit about what is interoception. Yep, I'm not sure why we're not getting those slides. There are receptors in our organs, including our skin, like the proprioceptive receptors in our muscles and joints. These cells are responsible for collecting important sensory information. The receptors then send that information via the limbic system to what we call this insular cortex, or insula for short. It's especially important in the regulation of our vital functions like body temperature, hunger, thirst, breathing rate. That is our current body state. The insula provides the emotional cognition of these physiological experiences. Individuals who struggle with the interoceptive sense may not understand their emotions or feelings. Amanda Moran, who's an educational and neurodiversal consultant, says that without being able to feel and interpret your body sensations, it's much harder to clearly identify the actual emotion attached to it. For instance, to feel fear, an individual must recognise that their muscles are tense and their breathing is shallow and their heart is racing. Without sensing those sensations from within our body, how do we know that what we're feeling is fear? This is further complicated with individuals with sensory processing issues, where the brain may have trouble making sense of the information coming through. An itch may feel like pain, or a pain may feel like an itch. These complexities can be confusing not only to the individual who's living with these experiences, but their caregiver, the clinician, the teacher. We have another person called Emma Leach, who's an outreach teacher from Fremantle's in the UK, and she talks about individuals finding interoceptive input irritating. If they're generally hypersensitive to sensory input coming externally to them, they may overreact to the interoceptive sensations. They over-respond. For instance, they may eat more than others to avoid feeling hunger pains because they don't like that sense of hunger pains. They also may use the toilet more often than necessarily because they don't like the feel of their bladder when it's full. Our deafblind community has acknowledged the presence of internal sensations for a long time. And please see this quote from our own Mr. David Brown back in 2005 in relation to Charge syndrome. Children with Charge syndrome are truly multisensorily impaired, having difficulties not only with vision, hearing, and also with a sense of perceived balance, touch, temperature, pain, pressure, and smell, as well as problems with breathing and swallowing, eating and drinking, digestion, and temperature control. These difficulties or internal sensations described in this quote, going back to 2005, are actually included in the definition of interoception. So it is something that the deafblind community have been aware of, but we're now saying, you know, this may be a little bit more broad-based than what we first thought. Okay. I'll now briefly outline the neuroanatomy involved in interoception. And as I said, neuroanatomy is always something that not everyone feels passionate about, but it's actually important to know that they have identified this cortex and where it is. So the insula is part of the cerebral cortex, and the cerebral cortex is also called our brain matter, and it's the brain's outermost layer of cell tissue. Its appearance has many grooves, which we call sulci, and folds, which we call gyri, and that increases the surface area, allowing large amounts of information to be processed. Plays a key role in memory, thinking, learning, judgment, planning, reasoning, emotions, and functions related to senses. In the first image of a brain, the external lobes are viewed from the side. A section below the frontal and parietal lobes and above the temporal lobe have been pulled back, showing that deep lobe, which is highlighted in green insula. And that's looking forward, so slightly at the front of our brain. The second image gives an alternative view and just shows that, that again, it's forward of our brain. So this image is a brown and beige drawing of a brain cut horizontally from the front of the brain, which is at the top of the image, to the back of the brain at the bottom of the image. The insular lobes are indicated by dark brown shading on either side, just to one side of the brain, just above the midpoint. We're using the terms insula when we're talking about this cortex, but within the deafblind field, you would also have heard lots of discussion around the limbic system. So to clarify the difference between the insula and the limbic system, which is known to have a significant role in interoception, we can define each by its role. So the insula, being part of the cerebral cortex, is the thinking brain. It's constantly mapping our body state to maintain homeostasis, and its job is to act on the senses being experienced. So it acts on what we're feeling. The limbic system, on the other hand, is a complex set of structures that lie on both sides of the thalamus, just under the cerebral cortex. And this area is where the messages are relayed. So it's a coordination area of that information between the cortex and anything coming lower down through the system. Okay. I'd like to show you two quick videos about the limbic system, as it's often talked about within the deafblind field. These videos are a component of the absolutely excellent Open Hands, Open Access Deafblind Intervenor learning modules produced by the National Centre on Deafblindness in the US. And these are free modules, so I highly recommend everyone to go and have a look at that if they haven't already. The first video features Kimberly Lorga, titled Brain Overview. In the video, Kimberly is visible from the waist up, standing in front of a white background. She has short, wavy brown hair and is wearing a brown jacket and jumper. Kimberly is holding a colourful model of the brain that has been cut through the middle from front to back. The first video describes the importance of the thalamus. Most academics, but not all, accept that the thalamus is part of the limbic system.
So as information comes in through the reticular activating system, it's filtering out some information, because if we received all of the information that was available through our senses, we would be overwhelmed. And if the reticular activating system is overwhelmed, we are overwhelmed as well. The information then is going to go up to an area of the brain called the thalamus. The thalamus is often thought as the gatekeeper. It's deciding what information needs to have most attention from the cortices. Now, of course, the brain is concerned about survival, so it's having to make decisions about this information. And is it a threat to my well-being, to my comfort, my safety, and my survival? Information from 11 of the 12 cranial nerves comes into the thalamus. The thalamus needs to look at that information. Is it familiar? Is it unfamiliar? Does it fit with prior information, prior learning? Information that is not considered a threat and doesn't have to do with basic survival needs and does make some sense is going to be sent up to the thinking brains, and then the brain's going to be able to use it for that cognition, for that rational thought, decision-making, planning, reasoning. But if the information coming in is distorted and incomplete, as often happens in deaf-blindness, or there's a mismatch in information, or for whatever reason the brain's not able to process that I've received that information before and to know that it's not a threat to me, the information is going to be sent down to an area of the brain called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is then going to send information down to the pituitary gland, the master gland. And that's going to trigger our stress response, our fight, flight, fright response. Now the hypothalamus has a clue, because when the hypothalamus is triggered, that's where we're going to see those subtle changes in the child's body responses to indicate that stress is happening. We may see changes in their breathing, they may have changes in their color, we may even see their ears turn red. Lots of different clues that you'll notice as an intervener that indicate subtle changes are happening, that this is too much information, too fast for the brain to be able to take it into the thalamus and send it up to the thinking lobes. And it's going down instead to the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and triggering that stress response.
That first video describes the importance of the thalamus. Just to be aware that most academics, but not all, consider the thalamus as part of the limbic system. The second video again features Kimberly and describes the limbic system in a little bit more detail.
When we talk about the thalamus, for our purposes, we're going to think of the thalamus as part of the limbic system. Some researchers see it as separate, some include it. Other areas of the limbic system are the amygdala and the hippocampus. The thing that's important to remember about the limbic system in general is the limbic system is about memory and about emotions and about fear. And the limbic system likes familiarity. It likes to be comfortable. It likes those things that it can predict to know that it's safe and secure in the world. When you develop relationship with your student with deaf-blindness as an intervener, as you develop resonance as discussed in other modules, you're working right here in the limbic system. So the brain knows that I'm safe and I'm secure, and the information coming in is okay to go up to the thinking brains, and I'm available for learning. As compared to when that relationship is not there, and I don't know that I'm safe and secure in the world, more information coming in is now having to be filtered and sent down to the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and triggering that stress response.
Okay, so as we see, the limbic system and the insula work very tightly together and very important, both mechanisms. So we'll look now at the importance of interoception, and interoception is a key for some important skills. Firstly, emotions. Every emotion we have evokes a certain feeling in our bodies. We need solid interoceptive awareness to understand how we are feeling in certain situations and to act on it. If you're about to enter a situation that you know may be challenging, for example, attending an important meeting, Your stomach may flutter, your heart may beat quickly, and you may start to sweat and your muscles tense up. These sensations indicate that you're feeling nervous. And so you may take some time out to prepare. You may have a drink of water to settle your nervous, or you may move away from the situation. Another example is when the insula recognises pain and relates it to an unpleasant feeling. The resultant conscious effect is to move away from pain. So both those pieces of information have passed through the limbic system to the insula, and we're able to make decisions on what to do to remove ourselves from these situations. Secondly, with the experiences, it impacts skills. So Kelly Mailer, who is the OT I mentioned previously from the US, wrote a book in 2017, and she talks about interoception also impacting skills such as decision-making, intuition, social awareness, empathy, perspective taking, flexibility of thought, self-awareness, and problem solving. Sorry. Okay, so difficulties with interoception. For individuals who have difficulty with a system, we can describe them in terms of being under-responsive or over-responsive. If an individual under-responds, Kelly Mailer explains that they may not feel their sensations as readily as they are, unless they're very, very intense. For example, if an individual can't feel their bladder being stretched until it's completely full, then they may wait till the last minute to go to the toilet. Very worrying is the individual who may have a significant health issue but never complains of discomfort because it's more difficult for them to feel or sense pain. If an individual over-responds to interoceptive signals, they feel their sensations more readily. They may be distracted or highly anxious with constant highlighted awareness internally, which may not be aware of because we're very focused on sounds and other things coming in externally. But that individual may be experiencing what's happening internally, and so we may see some behavioural changes with that. Others report that they feel so many different internal sensations all at once that they're so sensitive to everything that's happening within their bodies. It's important to acknowledge that both under and over responders may also have difficulty in discriminating or pinpointing exactly what internal sensations they are experiencing and to make a sense of it. Mailer suggests that an individual may complain of feeling sick, but often can't give specific symptoms, or they may insist they feel happy, even though outwardly their expression is more like angry. If we look at interoceptive awareness now and its relationship to then self-regulation, the Autism and Low Incident Coaching team from Ohio have written that good levels of interoceptive awareness are clearly linked to the development of many important skill areas, including self-regulation. Interoceptive awareness is the ability to notice sensation and give meaning to the sensations and feelings, while self-regulation is the ability to control the way we're feeling it. So one is giving meaning to them, make them understand what they're sensing, and the self-regulation then is the control of what we feel. Self-regulation can help in a variety of ways, including attending to tasks, assisting at challenging activities, controlling emotions, matching energy levels to the task, and being able to engage consciously in healthy behaviours such as eating when hungry. The complexity of self-regulation of our emotional state is intertwined with interoception. For example, if you can feel yourself getting tense and acknowledge that the emotion you're feeling is anger, you then consciously know to slow down and take a few deep breaths. This identification of anger and the subsequent self-regulation is often beyond the scope of an individual with interoceptive challenges. In addition, and really important to know, is that the individual's ability to read their own physical signs and emotional states has been shown to directly impact the ability to read another person's physical and emotional state. So without good interoceptive awareness, self-regulation can't exist. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a look at the clinical significance and how we assess interoception. You know, there's no point in us saying that it's out there and let's acknowledge it if we can't actually then, you know, take some time and actually do a significant assessment. So there are a few facets of interoception that we can use to then work a clinical pathway. The image on the screen is presented in a table format, and the table consists of 2 columns and 7 rows. The first row is highlighted in a golden colour and contains 2 column headings, action and activity. I'll now go through the remaining 6 rows. So during the assessment process, we really should consider attention, so the ability to and the skill of observing internal body sensations. So the attention, the ability to actually concentrate down on those sensations. Detection, the presence or absence of conscious reporting. Can those, that attention to those sensations, can they then be expressed? The magnitude, which is the intensity of the sensation. Discrimination is a skill of localization of the sense to a specific organ system and being able to differentiate it from different sensations. Accuracy or sensitivity, complete, correct and precise monitoring, and self-reporting, so the ability to reflect on the experiences of the interoceptive state and make judgments about their outcomes and describe them through verbal or sign or motor responses. During the assessment process, it's also important to remember that a person may be hyposensitive in one sensory system and hypersensitive in another. This does just make it more complex, but it is the reality of what these individuals are living with. For this reason, it can also be helpful when you're performing any sort of assessment that you also map the sensory profile and indicate where sensitivities are, including possibly identifying maybe where some triggers are and where some sensory helpers are. Currently, there's no standardised tools to assess the entire interoceptive awareness of individuals, but there are several tools available for specific interoceptive aspects. So we have the multidimensional assessment of interoceptive awareness, the body awareness questionnaire, and the Toronto Alexithymia scale. Kelly Mailer herself has created some specific tools, and these include the interoceptive awareness interview, the assessment of self-regulation, and the caregiver questionnaire for interoceptive awareness. Disappointingly, within the field of deaf-blindness, these tools have barriers to our community due to them relying on self-reporting, being geared towards an adult population only, and being very visual focused. Can we build awareness of internal sensations? Current research clearly shows that yes, there are strategies that can be used to improve the ability of the individual to notice and begin to understand their body cues. That is improved interoceptive awareness. It's possible to train the awareness of what's happening inside the body to help an individual become aware of their internal sensations and then help them to regulate their resulting emotions while they're still beginning before they escalate. A therapist or teacher may direct the individual and their support network towards mindfulness activities to help them become more aware of interoceptive sensations. They may use body scanning, visualizations, problem solving, adaptations within the routine. Heavy work. Now, this activity involves pushing and pulling against the body, and that's to activate the proprioceptive pathways or encourage a sensory diet. Now, this is a set of physical activities that are used to maintain appropriate arousal states throughout the day. May include bouncing, rocking, swimming, swaying. Additionally, individuals can benefit from anatomy and social emotion books and are encouraged to incorporate games to learn things about their body. Dr. Neff, who's from Neurodivergent Insight, separates the under and over responder strategies and provides some great intervention ideas. The under responder experiences muted signals, meaning that essentially cells themselves are undersensitive, or the insula is having difficulty receiving or incorporating these signals. They're simply not getting enough information to process what's going on. These strategies include increased body awareness, so possibly using a body map, naming emotions or playing an emotional matching game. For example, match emotions by visually looking at pictures, feeling tactile images or tactile exploration of the face, then progress on to talking about how they might feel physically and mentally with each emotion. Might engage in exercises aimed to increase interoception using breathing or alerting techniques. Social stories are a great way to talk about the concepts that may be hard for an individual to understand or remember. Use a social story about the clothes they wore for a particularly memorable situation when you're trying to support the understanding of temperature and hot and cold by looking at the outside environment that matches that memorable situation and the clothing that they did wear for that situation. They might create accommodations, for example, visual and tactile prompts and cues, setting alarms to remind an individual to eat, drink, or use a bathroom, and to take sensory breaks. Their interoceptive over-responders have a heightened experience within their body signals. They struggle to differentiate the signals, and these signals may last longer than neurotypically expected. The strategies for this group include the mindfulness practices that increases body awareness and can help with differentiation struggles. Additionally, strategies of breathing, allowing time to focus on what's happening within the individual. Growing hands-on kids describe yoga's focus on listening to body and providing good vestibular and proprioceptive input as helpful for interoception. It encourages the individual to slow down, pay attention to the present and how their body is feeling. Engaging the vestibular system through rocking and swinging and the proprioceptive system using heavy activities, which we talked about, the pushing and pulling, can also support the individual when they're looking at an over-responsive state. Final one is called conscious acknowledgement, and that is actually bringing things down to a conscious level. For example, some of the things that we might classify as having danger connected to them. So, for example, pain, if the individual has a heightened pain experience that lasts longer than expected following its onset, we need to acknowledge, firstly, that the pain is real, because the pain may be something that we look at and say, this shouldn't be lasting this long. It really was only a knock on a table, and we're getting this expression of pain, this feeling, this emotion that's lasting much longer than it should. But we need to acknowledge that pain is real, while also reminding the individual that pain doesn't necessarily equal danger. And it's important to differentiate between the pain that's causing harm and the pain that is experienced as normal. We'll have a quick look at some of the strategies they've suggested in a little bit more detail. The image on the screen is a sketch outline of a body map with additional drawings representing feelings that are stuck on body parts that they correlate to. The examples are face on fire, tingling nose, knot in chest, tight fist, wobbly knees. The chart you choose for an individual can be a small representation image, or it can be actually an actual size chart traced around the person. It can be a 2D image, and by adding tactile markings, it can become more accessible. Or if you're lucky enough to have the resources, produce a 3D model. To indicate that the individual understands their chart and how it's connected to their body, activities in pointing to different parts of the body chart and they're getting them to point to or move to a part on the actual body can be helpful. Playing a game like Simon says using the chart. Use actions such as clench your fist, breathe deeply, touch your heart, and then ask them to point to the body parts on the chart that relate to each of those actions. You can also point to the body chart and ask them how it feels right now. For example, if we looked at the eyes, so we point to the eyes, they could be itchy, they could be sleepy, they could be awake, dry, watery. Caregivers, clinicians and educators can help the individual by identifying some of the external visual changes that we observe in an individual's body to cue them into possible emotional states. So we can actually, talk to the individual, sign to the individual, communicate in any method to the individual to describe, okay, I know that your body is tight, your muscles are now tight, or your face is tense. Help them to understand that by giving them that extra external input to help them focus in on the area. We can also provide periodic check-in by using this chart during the day, because we can track an individual's feeling using this body chart and reflect on their current state as the day goes on as well. The body map concept can also be helpful when we're looking at emotions. So we've used it previously looking at what we're feeling in these parts of our body. Now we can actually look at the emotional side of things. So this particular body map is a picture of an outline body with the main text in black stating feelings are something we feel in our body. Additional short text surrounds the image. So at 1 o'clock, the text says, show the places with these colours. Between 2 and 5 o'clock around the body, we have colours and emotions in text together. So in this situation, they've used blue for sad, black for fear, brown for guilt, red for anger, green for jealousy, orange for nervous, yellow for happy. And at 7 o'clock, the text says, where do you feel your feelings? So not only are they identifying that this feeling is being experienced, but then you can take this one step further by actually putting those colours. And again, you don't have to have the literacy of writing the words, but using the colours possibly, or in a situation where we've got someone who prefers to use something more tactile. I'm sorry, I'm going to have a cough. Something more tactile to add to the chart, and you can actually then place those colours or tactile images on parts of the body where this sadness is then experienced. So what is the physical emotion they're also experiencing when they're feeling this? And the chart aims to connect the individual's emotion to their body. So again, we're focusing on bringing those sensory feeling to the individual. It's very difficult and it's a slow process, but you find something that suits individuals. But we're always looking, and the research strongly supports that actually practicing at a conscious level what's happening with your body will help support the unconscious reaction in other situations as well. Other techniques they've mentioned are to do with breathing shapes. So breathing techniques are helpful strategies for calming bodies, as well as paying attention to what's going on inside of our body. So it helps us calm, but it also helps focus. And these are a couple of examples from coping skills for kids. And the first one's image is the images are reversed on my screen. So I'm going to go to the second one, is figure of 8 technique. This image is a dark brown outline figure of 8 lying on sideways on a white background and titled Lazy 8 Breathing, and includes the words breathe in on the anti-clockwise movement and breathe out on the clockwise movement. On the right of the screen, we have an image that at the base of this pale blue background image, there's white text stating using shapes to teach deep breathing. There's a large white square at the top of the image showing a black diamond shape. And then along the border of the diamond are the words breathe in, breathe out, and hold. These shapes can be made tactile for our deafblind community by adding textures and raised outlines for tactile tracing. And additionally, I've used haptics on the individual's body to mimic the breathing technique during the yoga session. Another example is called Simple Breaths, and it's from Growing Hands-On Kids. And it uses imagery and converts well to sign language and object replacement. For example, use smelling a flower for breathing in and blowing out a candle for breathing out. This deafblind example, we'll have a look at behaviours that are considered challenging sometimes within our individuals who are living with CHARGE syndrome. The reasons for these behaviours can vary and may be due to multisensory impairments, inability to self-regulate, issues with arousal, and additionally, interoceptive awareness. I would sincerely like to thank Ms. Eggs for allowing us to share her experience. And I'd also like to thank my colleague and friend, Ms. Linny Oliver, who works as a communication guide, as she supported Ms. X during all the phases of this process. Initially, it's important to discuss with the individuals what strategies could be used during periods of calmness and collaborate on what they've tried previously. Having a look at what's been effective and what hasn't, and being open on how the strategies could be used to help regain control when needed. But again, this needs to be done in a period of calm with the individual, not tried or attempted when the individual is experiencing possible overstimulation. Doing this together supports empowering the individual and gives them a sense of ownership and responsibility. I do apologise, I'm going to have another call. This is important as the skills require rebalancing emotional control, and the control of using these skills would ideally be made by the individual themselves in the long term, rather than with the support of a communication guide. So we don't want to make them reliant on the communication guide to support them through the process, but give them that skill set. And so that's why it's very important to do that while the individual is actually on a period of calm. First, we have what we call the foundation stage. When the individual begins to exhibit behaviours, the communication guide would approach them and use both hands and sign, stop, look at me. Having eye contact was important to the individual, and if the individual didn't respond, the communication guide would repeat the stage until they had eye contact. And this eye contact was discussed and identified as an important factor in those periods of calm prior to instigating it when the behaviours were starting. Step 1, maintaining the eye contact. The communication guide will then hold up 4 fingers on the left hand horizontally with a palm facing them. This was named the strategy position. When developing this method with the individual, the use of visual cues was really important to them. So they had something to focus on. And so therefore using the mindfulness strategy that we talked about within interoception. And I do apologise for my voice. Pointing to the first finger, which is really an Auslan list boy, the communication guide would then sign calm repeatedly, and the individual would copy the sign and or the action. Pointing to the second finger, the communication guide would then sign breathe, taking exaggerated deep breaths repeatedly. This is where the patterns of breathing, for example, the diamond or figure 8 could be used. And it's important to remember that these activities need to be practiced in a period of calm so that they can be employed when experiencing this heightened state. Pointing to the third finger, the communication guide would sign walk to indicate to the individual to go for a walk and lean against a wall. This was to introduce the proprioceptive bombardment suggested in the strategies for an over-responsive presentation. If the individual was still unable to manage their heightened state, The communication guide and the individual would stop walking and re-engage the strategy of eye contact. The communication guide would then hold up their hand in that strategy position again and wait for the individual to copy. The communication guide would then point back to the first finger and then the second finger and remind them to focus on calm and breathing. With prompting and when their state was not at maximal height, the individual will be encouraged to initiate going back these steps themselves. Finally, we have what we call the reinforcement stage. When the individual had begun self-regulation but may not have gained composure using the above strategies, the communication guide would face them, engage eye contact, and hold their hand up in strategy position again and point to the fourth finger and sign what. The individual was then given the opportunity to express what they were feeling. Or if the individual wouldn't express to the communication guide, because sometimes within that heightened state, the individual has now maybe passed a point where they're able to engage, the communication guide would then remind them, talk, friend, family, and offer to bring in another member of the close network to support them at that stage. The individual would often feel upset about their behaviours at this stage, so it was important for them to be heard without judgment and have their feelings validated. By being consistent with this method, just back to another point. To apologise. By being consistent with this method, there were many occasions when it was only necessary to engage eye contact for the communication guide to hold their hand up in strategy position and for the individual to start self-regulating. It's interesting that when having casual conversations with other deafblind community members, the individual would often instigate showing others this method using a visual social story, going through each step and talking about what situations they use them in and how it was helpful for them to regulate. These were always really empowering conversation for the individual and their self-awareness, as well as becoming a good role model within the combined group. As the field of interoception research continues to evolve, we've got researchers, clinician, education, and deafblind community members working together to explore its potential application in the development of interventions related to interoceptive therapy, interoceptive dysfunction, but also mental health and well-being. And really, it's quite important that by understanding and embracing this eighth sense, this interoception, we can add to and improve the way we interact with and understand participants in our deafblind community. It is an eighth sense. So within our deafblind community, we obviously see it in so many different situations, and you're probably starting to think, wow, I get that. I can see it in some of our individuals. Why are we not discussing this more within the deafblind field? I'm not sure. As I said, the research and the clinical application with particularly the autism spectrum field is quite intense. Again, it's an adjunct. It is something else to help us explain another part of an individual to help understand what they're experiencing, because it's only until we really get a better understanding of what they're experiencing can we support them to take those next steps to independence.